What's up, guys? What's going on? This is RJ Game News USA here, and today I want to talk about Dexter Original Sin Season 1 and give my thoughts and opinions on what I felt about the season. Now, as somebody that's watched Dexter as a long time fan, I would say that this was very good. A 9.5 out of 10, and I'm going to go over why. But first, please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you like this kind of content. So, like I just said, Dexter's one of my all-time favorite TV shows. It's probably my second favorite show behind Breaking Bad. It's literally that good. And when I heard about a prequel for Dexter, I had a little bit of concern. First of all, we have to get to the characters and how they performed. So instantly, anytime you're doing a prequel, especially a prequel that involves actors that weren't the original actors portraying younger versions of the show you liked, there's inherent concern that it just won't come off very well. I can honestly say I'm pleasantly surprised with all the actors in this show. I feel like when it comes to Dexter, we got to start there. Young Dexter's played very well. It helps that his inner voice is the older Dexter's voice, but he plays up his nerdy side very well. A bumbling serial killer trying to figure out his way in life, and he fits. It works. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Also, I gotta say, somebody else that nailed it out of the park was Deb. Deb, you know, the vibe of Deb, but being younger, completely hit right here. Like, she was sassy. You could have convinced me that was the actress when she was younger, and I would have believed you. Because she nailed the character of Deb. And also helped, you know, find her motivation to become a cop later on as well. And then there's a character I actually think was enhanced by this show. I actually think Harry Morgan was played better in this prequel than what he was in the actual main series. We got to see a lot of Harry, that's Dexter's dad. We got to see a lot of what went on between him and Dexter's mom that was more than just what the flashbacks were. Okay? And it was a wild ride, to say the least. Then you have Dexter's mom also getting a more fulfilled role with the prequel part of this prequel series. Brian Moser getting a little bit of his story fleshed out. Plot-wise, spoiler alert, I was a little concerned, how were they going to deal with Brian already surfacing when it's like 15 years before he surfaces in Dexter Season 1? And they handled this very well because Harry is able to convince Brian essentially to leave Dexter alone and not to contact him. And it makes sense then that Brian did not contact Dexter until Season 1 when he actually finds out he's a killer. So I bought it. I wasn't buying it first, but I ended up buying it. Continuity-wise, there isn't too much here that is screwed up. Like, for example, they didn't really mention much about Dr. Vogel, which a lot of fans didn't like her anyway. And so there could have been some continuity stumbles there, but there's actually nothing that's in direct conflict with that. There's a few interesting tidbits here. We all thought Harry committed suicide once he saw Dexter do a kill, but he seems really comfortable with Dexter's killing spree, we should say, in this series. So it really leaves the door open for either retconning that death or changing the circumstances behind it in some way. It's gonna... How does Harry end up so sickened by Dexter that he ends up committing suicide? We'd have to find out. Now, let's talk about some of the other characters, the side characters. Masuka's great. Masuka is just like Masuka's been. Batista he's the only one that feels like he's a little out of place. He feels like he's a little bit of cosplay. I do think it's interesting. You have the blonde forensics lady that isn't really there in the main series. So be curious what ends up happening to her. It also looks very likely we're going to get a season 2, even though originally this looked like a season 1 project only. And they crammed so much into the first season. But despite all that, it looks like there's an opening there for another season of Original Sin, which I'm down for. I think the best prequel of all time is Better Call Saul. It still doesn't surpass the original. No prequel ever can. But Dexter Original Sin is the next best prequel. Just like Dexter is the next best show to Breaking Bad, in my opinion. So it holds up very well. Why not a 10, you may ask? Like I said, a lot of it's minor complaints around the edges of continuity and whatnot. But for the most part, this is an excellent series. I don't think it's the greatest to jump into if you hadn't seen the main show, which is one of the reasons I can't give it a 10. Because I would still highly recommend watching the actual Dexter first. You can watch Better Call Saul without watching any Breaking Bad and really still enjoy it. I think that it's kind of hard at times to enjoy Original Sin if you haven't seen Dexter at least once. So that is a slight issue there. But overall, this is a really good show, and I highly recommend it. It's in my short list of show of the year for 2025 for sure, which we'll talk about later on this year. But I got to talk about the big baddie of the season, and this is what really won me over. Honestly, when we found out it was the police chief. I know, spoiler alert. But the police chief being the kid killer was crazy. And by the way, they pulled no punches with violence and with acts of violence and bloody imagery in this show. They went full on. And they also brought back a lot of season 1-like humor, which I enjoyed. But I was not expecting the police chief at all. At all. I was expecting it to be Deb's rich boyfriend that she befriended in season 1 to actually be the killer. But when we found out that it's the chief himself, I was a little surprised, especially considering his own kid was kidnapped and he was willing to harm his own child. I wasn't super sold on his motivations if he just was hating his ex-wife. Seems a little extreme for somebody to actually murder people over. I feel like the motivations weren't quite there, which is another reason I have a hard time giving it a perfect score. But the villain itself and the twist of how you find out he's the main villain, I think is very interesting and definitely one of the more exciting parts of the season. So guys, that's my thoughts on Dexter Original Sin Season 1. Are you going to watch it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. Peace. I'm out. Have a good one.